Hi, this is Ted Seelheimer from the University of Houston on behalf of the NAAC Rules Education Committee, here again with the NAAC Conversation. It's the holiday season, it's a giving season. So today I wanted to talk about ways that we here in the industry can give back, specifically to aspiring professionals that are looking to break into compliance. I'm excited here to have here today to talk, and I wrote it down, so I got the whole title in here. My friend Aaron Hernandez, who is the director of the Alan Bud Selig Sports Law and Business Program at the Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law at Arizona State University. Aaron, great to see you.
It's great to see you, Ted, and I apologize for that mouthful that you have to do. You only had to do it once. Imagine having to introduce yourself to people having to say all those
All the
words.
time. Well, then I'm going to give you a time frame, and I'll start the stopwatch. Give me a 30-second rundown of what your job is right now.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me today. As the director of the Alan Bud Selig Sports Law and Business Program at the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law, my role is mostly to run the day-to-day operations and the long-term strategic vision of the SLB program. So everything from admissions to recruiting to strategic development to actual development, curriculum, hiring people, and then at the end of the day, our main program goal is getting our students connected to and eventually employed in jobs in sports.
Now, and obviously, from a compliance perspective, which is where we're coming from, tell us a little bit about your compliance background.
Sure. So when I was in law school, I actually, my first foray into compliance was actually interning with Marquette's compliance department there. It was during my 3L year, starting in the summer right before. I helped with a lot of rules education initiatives, a lot of the back end work, the back of the office work. They needed some help because we were pretty thin on staff members at the time, and also we were in the middle of a pretty big investigation with our men's basketball program that my boss did such a good job on that it ended up going at that time secondary, eventually level three. And my whole experience with that was she did such a good job that she almost lost her job as a result, and that kind of turned me off from actually going onto the institutional side of compliance right after graduation. But I still found NCAA regulation extremely appealing as a career path. And so I ended up getting the postgraduate internship at the NCAA in enforcement in 2013. Remember, in 2013, that's when enforcement was going through a lot of upheaval with the Shabazz Muhammad case and the University of Miami case dealing with Nevin Shapiro. Both were mishandled, and multiple enforcement personnel were fired. A lot were upset that their friends were fired and thought it was mishandled from inside the organization, so they left. And so when I got there as an intern, there were more empty desks than there were people sitting in desks. And in fact, that year, I think one of the stats was that our department interviewed more job candidates than we did like in the course of our actual core work. And that's when I was getting there as an intern. And so even though it was a bad situation, it ended up being a really good situation for me in my career because it allowed me to kind of cut the line in some ways and get the job, which I eventually kept me there at the NCAA for the next about 6 years. And that was being the assistant director of football with the enforcement staff there. And I was there all the way up until last year when I decided to move to Phoenix, Arizona for better weather.
Well, imagine there's a couple other things there that took you to Phoenix. But one of the things that I was wanting to talk to you about today is kind of your perspective there, working with students and working with folks who are trying to break into sports law, college athletics, compliance specifically. Is there anything that you're seeing with your students in terms of what they're looking for, how they're being guided to approach their job search? Anything that we can learn about what they're thinking as they're approaching their career?
One misconception I think a lot of them have, and I hope a lot of your peers and my former peers will agree with me thinking it's a misconception, is they think everybody's just really super busy right now, and they're overwhelmed in their jobs, so they don't have time for me, a student who wants to break into this industry, Ted's got no time for me. He's got all this like coronavirus stuff going on. And I've told a lot of them, I don't really think that's the case. I think a lot of people are actually really, really receptive to doing these things, to doing these networking opportunities, to having conversations with you, and they're generally a whole lot less busy because they're just not flying around the same amount they have been. In fact, I've had some industry professionals who prior to March of 2020 were some of the most difficult people in the world to get a hold of. And all of a sudden they wanted to just chat on the phone. And I was like, man, this is really weird. What is this person doing calling me, just wanting to kind of hang out on the phone? And it became clear that these are really busy people that just all of a sudden had nothing to do with their time. They had a lot of time on their hands and they had no idea what to do. And we had a big clip of people, especially our board. Our board at our program is fantastic, who were reaching out and saying, hey, how can we help? How can we spend time with the next generation of leaders in athletics? And so there was a real big disconnect between the folks who wanted to network and the people who wanted to help out, and the impression of what each other was doing. And so I would say that from your perspective, the more you can encourage students, like, hey, it's actually a really good time to talk to people because we ain't got nothing else going on, I think is really helpful.
I know that whenever I'm talking to students about my job or college athletics in general, I tell them that networking always gets a bad rap in terms, because people are afraid of going and just talking about stuff. But if you're truly interested in the industry, truly interested in their job, it's not just lip service. Then you're just connecting with another person who has the same interest as you. And don't be afraid to reach out and kind of make that connection, because you never know where it's going to lead. I think that's kind of leads into my next question is, what is the best guidance that we can give folks besides, reaching out, that are interested in compliance, about how they should approach their job search and approach, trying to talk to people in the industry.
Yeah, we tell our students all the time, especially given the current economic situation within sports, be flexible. If you're looking to do compliance specifically, and you're looking at, but you have some parameters, it has to be at a Division 1 Power 5 school. Maybe you have a certain conference that you like. Maybe you're down to a certain city or even a certain school. I've got to go work at my school that I've rooted for my entire life, and that's where I need to be right away. This is probably not going to work out for you right away. And so that hasn't changed much, even pre pandemic and economic downturn. I would tell students, like, you should be flexible. Like, if you want to work in compliance, make sure you're in love with it as a discipline, not just being in love with going to go work at the University of Houston, and just finding your way in there some way. Because if you're not in love with the underlying job, the allure that attracted you there in the first place is going to fade pretty quickly, regardless. So that's one thing is, we certainly tell them you need to be flexible, and also you got to hustle too. I think one thing that I've noticed with a lot of folks who are trying to break in right now, and we're talking about these first internships that they're doing in sports, is they expect these things to be posted. I've had multiple students come to me and say, hey, I really want to do compliance, but there's these three entities, three larger known entities within like the Phoenix area, and then we got U of A down in Tucson, where I've been looking and I just haven't seen their internships for compliance posted. And I said, well, you're probably not going to find it posted. Some of our institutions will do something paid and they'll post through their HR website, but largely those things are very temporary. They won't end up on the bigger job boards like D1 Tickers email or the NCAA market, stuff like that. So if you want to do one of these first shot things where you're getting a flavor and of compliance and getting some training from some good people, you're going to have to connect with them, and you're going to have to make your interest known, like, hey, like I really want to do compliance. What do you think? Like, and hope that Ted likes you enough that he says, well, why don't you come work for free 99 here
Right.
at the University of Houston, and the market's there.
Right.
The market's there. The one thing that will frustrate me is when we have compliance offices that say like I just don't have the time to take that on. And it's a little bit of a conundrum because I constantly heard during my time at the NCAA that multiple compliance people, you're always busy. There's always something going on, and you could always use more help. And literally, free help is being offered
Right.
by students who desperately want to do it. They do a good job because they really want to make an impression and land in the industry, and then they get turned away because like we just don't have the capacity to get the free help. That's never made sense to me.
No, and I'm someone who had a lot, some of the barriers. I practiced law and then realized it wasn't for me and was looking to come back. It was that's what did it is, it was the fourth meeting that was connected to the first meeting that I tried to have that finally got me that free spot, that volunteer spot to put that time in and build up the resume. And I think that's, it's a, it was a blessing because it showed my desire to do it. But it's also a curse because it ended up being, you end up having to have a little bit of luck. Hopefully, it's hard to move for a low or free paying gig. And especially for someone, if you're looking to change careers, you have to, there's a lot of, you may have family, you may have financial considerations. And, now I'm kind of talking against following your dreams and getting into compliance, but obviously it's all out there in terms of what you have to consider your personal situation. And obviously, especially someone coming out of school, maybe they have that flexibility to go a different city, a different state, maybe take a different type of job than they were expecting to get that experience and build up that sweat equity that'll then lead to the next job and the next job it's gonna pay off. So
Yes, sir.
well, one of the things I think maybe the biggest thing is, what, besides, we've talked about what the students can do. What can we do? What can our established professionals do to support aspiring professionals that are looking to break in?
Well, but before I answer that, I do want to touch one
Yeah.
point that you mentioned, and that's these folks who are kind of non-traditional candidates, who've done a pivot in their careers. Recovering lawyers are a lot of them, like yourself, and I think they end up being some of the best job candidates. And I'm referencing my time at the NCAA when we had people decide to do the internship and they were in their 30s or 40s even, because they decided to pivot to wanting to get into compliance, and they thought this was the best way for them to get into college athletics because it's what they loved. They knew they were not going to make as much money. They knew things were going to be as financially convenient, but they wanted life to be more satisfying. And every time, every year when I was there at the NCAA, I was involved in our intern hiring process and enforcement. Every single year, there was at least one intern who was older than me. In fact, there was one year where all three of them were older than me. And we just always had a really healthy respect for those people to make that big decision. I know there's always a question in the hiring process, like, why are you doing this? Do you realize what you're getting yourself into? Well, these are smart people. Yes, they've researched. A lot of them are lawyers. In our case, they've researched what they're getting into, and they know what the sacrifice is, and they really hustle in big ways. I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth here for a second, because one thing that I think is really frustrating when we try to get some of our students or help our students get that first job in sports, where they haven't had experience before, is they get caught in this catch 22 for a little bit, where they don't have any experience that they can use, where every job demands some experience. And I think experience sometimes is a little bit overrated in the hiring process, and it could be a little bit of a crutch, just to look at that resume and say, oh, he's been somewhere 10 years doing XYZ. And my thought is, like, what's he been doing there for 10 years, all that long, and then he wants to do the same thing here? I'm not sure how motivated this person's going to be. And we dealt with a lot of those candidates in the full-time hiring process at the NCAA, where it was like, my goodness, this person has all the experience in the world, but they're just not a good fit. or it just didn't end up translating well in the full-time hire.
One
On
thing
the flip
I
side,
thought that I brought in from my experience was, it was working in an environment where the majority of their people aren't wearing sweatpants to work gives you a different perspective on kind of, the administrative and the professional side of things that can kind of, maybe give some different perspective on this may not necessarily be as big a deal as you may think it is sometimes. So,
yeah, yeah, for sure. And so those folks who decide to do that career pivot, I think they're a wonderful mix of both worlds where they actually do have that real world experience, or a little bit more seasoned, but they don't lose that motivation. All too often, I'm sure plenty of people who are watching this working in compliance, that I'm sure you work with plenty of people where it's like, gosh, like, you know, so and so down the hall is clearly you're just like along for the ride, collecting a check, and that frustrates me. One of the reasons that I ended up taking this job was there was about 1 week every year at the NCAA when I'd go back to my alma mater, Marquette Law School, and I would do recruiting and development for Marquette Law and spend a lot of time with students who were there for a weekend, and our job was to flip them. They were committed to other law schools, or they had scholarship to other law schools, and the job was to go in and flip them, and kind of sell them on like, hey, you should come here because this is where you do sports law. And every time I'd spend a week there, I would come away so full of life and energy, because everybody there was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, hadn't been jaded by the world yet,
right.
and it was encouraging, and they clearly had a lot of gas in the tank, and were ready to fire on all cylinders. And so getting to be around that constantly is something that's I cherish a lot in this job. There's a lot of young folks, or people who are young to working in sports, that just have a lot of ambition and drive. And so again, getting back to the non-traditional candidate, they have a lot of drive to want to succeed in sports because they came from somewhere they don't want to be anymore, and they really, really want to be here now. And so, um, to all your counterparts, considering those people, if you have, if they raise a red flag for you, and you want to, you want to err on the side of somebody who's done the thing for 10 years, I would ask you, maybe you should take a look at that process again. Um,
Well,
in
but how about the sort of for the new folks? What can we do to support the new person, maybe the more traditional candidate who's looking for those opportunities, or just to talk about how they should approach their search?
Yeah, one thing you won't believe it, and we referenced this in the pre-call, so I'll bring it here on the recorded interview. Is I've been a little bit surprised and saddened by how many industry professionals, and non-compliance, by the way, but how many
Sure. No,
sports
no.
industry professionals have just turned down uh, students wanting to have informational interviews. In informational interviews, my God, what do they cost you? They cost you a little bit of time. And I know time is money, but my gosh, I feel like we all have a little bit more time on our hands, especially right now. And and I've had students who've just kind of beat their head against the wall. Like, gosh, they just either won't respond to me. And they're doing all the right things too. We're making sure they're not being knuckleheads on our end. They either, this person won't respond to me, or the worst is they respond and they say, "I'm sorry, I'm unavailable for informational interviews. I just don't do those things." And I think back to my experience. I'm a first generation law student. I have no family that works in sports. I really, really wanted to work in sports, and to make a very long story short, I had a similar thing happen to me when I was in law school, where somebody, actually in compliance, by the way, just said like, yeah, like I'm not gonna help you. And it was really devastating. Yeah, because I remember thinking, gosh, like some of these folks I go to school with, they know people, or dad is somebody, or or maybe they played in college, and I had none of those things. And I thought, when I reached out to this person who had a similar I think path into what I wanted to do, and they shut it down. I thought, well, that's it, this isn't going to work out for me. And I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to make law school work for me uh, professionally in other ways, which luckily it's an extremely useful degree.
Yep.
But I really, really wanted to go into sports. And I did say when that happened, this ever works out for me, I'm never going to make anybody feel like I felt right now ever again. And so I go a little bit overboard. People reach out to me cold on LinkedIn. I actually have a couple of really good friends who that's how we met,
Oh,
actually.
wow.
It was cold on
Nice.
LinkedIn. And
Professional Tinder. Yes.
yeah, right, exactly. I've got multiple students who'll reach out about our program now, but when I was at the NCAA, people who were really interested in working in the NCAA. And what does it cost you just to answer an email? What does it cost you to set up 30 minutes of your time, 15 minutes if you're really that muy importante that you can only afford 15 minutes, and set it up for next month, doesn't need to be this month. And so one, just the receptive nature and just giving back, because I guarantee you, if you're in one of these positions in sports, you probably didn't do it all on your own. In fact, I won't say probably, you definitely didn't do it all on your own. The amount of relationships, and the amount that relationships plays into people having success in their career, particularly in our industry segment, I think is more salient than other industries, at least from what I can tell. And so, be nice to these people who really want to do a good job, and then take chances. Take chances and bet on yourself as a leader. Remember, when you look at those resumes and you want to default to that guy who's got 10 years experience doing exactly the same thing, like, ask yourself the question, what is he doing this again for? Don't immediately default to, hey, this is less work for me, he can just come in and I don't have to do anything, because it's usually not like that, is what is how it turns out. And so maybe with a younger person, you have to invest more into them earlier on, but the dividends pay more, as well. So those are my two big asks of the compliance industry, which it already does, honestly, a pretty good job of. There's plenty of people who helped me out during my time at the NCAA. A lot of my professional development happened because of wonderful people in compliance, and so just a reminder, bet on yourself as a leader and take chances on those people who want to start out, and we'll put the pedal to the metal for you as a result.
There we go. So it sounds like what we need to do is respond, pick up the phone, talk to folks, think about the types of candidates we're bringing in, expand your pool, and then think about opportunities to create volunteer GA internship positions. And once you have one, you'll see how satisfying and rewarding it could be for you to give back, as well as to hopefully a little bit of work off your hands if you give them some real stuff to do, and makes your job a little bit easier. So, Aaron,
Yeah,
I appreciate it. Thank you
absolutely.
so much for being a part of the NAT conversation. Always great to connect. And happy holidays to you. It looks like you guys you have it going on there at home. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. To all my friends at NAC, I missed seeing you this year. I certainly hope we get to see each other in person this 2021. And hopefully we have a convention where we all can be there together. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, to everybody. And again, thank you so much for having me.
thank you so much, Aaron. Thanks everyone. Have a happy holiday season. We'll see you next month for the next conversation. Take care.